Do you own a property in Ubud or Canggu? Have you been wondering what the relative value of your region is in terms of its approach and its desirability to short-term rentals? Have you wondered if you're going to buy a property, should you pick one region or the next? Well, today on the Bali Business Review, you will receive some staggering and amazing insights using the leading technology that is able to peer inside underneath the hood and show you insights that you've never seen before on YouTube. So stick around and watch to the very end as I, your host, Jing, here on Market Insights, will drill down and show you all the secrets that most investors fail to see. Stick around and watch the rest of this episode. Okay, so the first thing I want to show everybody is this staggering piece of technology developed by the data scientists at Bukit Vista. So what do you see here? This is a 3D spatial map illustrating the relative popularity of different regions throughout Bali. What you're seeing is that more popular areas are, of course, taller in the number of bars. But what does each bar represent? Well, let's go pick a bar and see what it is, okay? So let's take a look at this bar right here. This is Plumera Homestay Bali, and when we open it opens up to this beautiful listing that we see that's incredible. And the reason why it was so tall was because it has over 591 reviews. That's significant. That is a ton of reviews. Estimates go that 3 times the number of reviews gets you relatively the number of bookings that this property has received. So looking at that, it's close to almost 600 bookings multiplied by 3. You're talking about close to maybe 2,000, roughly 2,000 bookings that this 1-bedroom private villa has received in Seminyak. Okay, enough with the demonstration. Let's now go into the comparison. So as we look at our 3D map, it becomes once again a bit difficult to actually figure out where our orientation is. So I'm going to draw on this screen, and hopefully you can follow me here and you'll be able to see what the results are. So as we take a look at this map, there are different regions, and some of these regions are better defined and some of these regions are a little bit harder to see. I'm going to use some blue ink, and the blue ink will indicate the boundary of the area known as Ubud. So that one is right here. Oops, a little bit of a mistake. But Ubud is the boundary that I've drawn here in the blue. That starts in the central highlands of Bali, and it goes all the way up to the lakeside over on this here. So the airport, of course, is this strip of land down here in the red. That's where most visitors will arrive and leave from Bali. And then there's a few regions. The region known as Canggu is generally in this area that I've drawn in green. Now you can see Canggu is a continuum all the way to the airport, passing through Seminyak, passing through Kuta. This is normal. The expansion of the initial developments that we saw in Bali actually progressed from the airport in Kuta first and moved its way up the coastline. So that's something that we have seen consistently over the years. But getting back to the area known as Canggu, here it is, okay? So if you're looking at Canggu, you're talking about this region down here, and it's a little bit hard to see if I write it in green. So this region here is Canggu. Now that we've defined our regions well, let's go back to the 3D spatial map and spin around a little bit. Okay, so we can see from the spatial map here and examine these two areas, and both are sizable. You can see lots of listings here in Canggu, probably in the thousands of listings. It looks like literally a forest of skyscrapers in this area. But what about Ubud? Ubud is also formidable. It's also very powerful. There's quite a lot of listings over here too as well. And it's not even finished loading yet. So there's going to be more once this program is fully fetched, all the extra listings in Ubud. So you're going to see expansion this way. But as you can see, before the listings have loaded, Ubud covers an incredible area that ranges a bit south and also a bit north. So it's developing in a multi-dimensional manner. But before we go into too much of the regions, let's go and find who the winners are. Who are the properties? Who are the listings? Who are the hosts behind some of the most successful properties? All we need to do is to come over here. We'll tilt the graph a little bit and we'll start looking for really, really tall bars. Okay, here's one of the tallest bars, Tropical Canggu Villa in Ricefield. Let's open that up, go inside and see what there is. This is a fairly traditional 2000s design. So you see here, it's a normal roof, wood plank. This would be called I think the Grounds Kent design that we saw a lot of in Karma Jimbaran. Long story short, this location and this pairing of design is a desirable experience. This is what guests want. You can know that guests want this because they've booked it at least 425 times. But once again, like I said, the heuristic is about every third guest will leave a review. So you take the reviews, you multiply by 3, and you can estimate that this property has gotten close to 1,200 bookings in its history. All right, that's good, but let's find another sample point. Let's find a sample point a little bit further up north that's also doing good. We'll tilt the graph a little bit over here so we can see the seascape over here and pick something closer to the beach. Okay, what about this one? Once again, fairly large size villa. It's enough space for 11 guests, 3 bedrooms, 227 reviews. Also this is what we would call the L-shaped design. As you can see, there's a pool and there's one wing and another wing of the house that sort of wraps around the pool in the shape of an L. So also fairly common, but very interesting to see. And that's the combination of, once again, design and location that works really well in Canggu. Why are we seeing so many of these larger properties in Canggu? And one of the reasons that Canggu distinguishes itself, in my observations, is that Canggu is a very, very hard place to say no to. There's something there for pretty much everybody. So because there's something there for pretty much everybody, it oftentimes is very easy to engage and organize a large group to travel to Canggu. Once again, you're not talking about a lot of climbing like the beaches in Uluwatu. There's food and accommodations and entertainment for every appetite that you can imagine. So Canggu is a no objection destination. And plus, who doesn't want to have a beach holiday in Bali? So once again, most of the popular objects that we see as we go through these listings are, once again, larger size properties. You can see this one has a capacity for 6 guests. It's 3 bedrooms, and it's also located in the Canggu Perainan area. All right, so let's go over and see what's successful in Ubud. So we'll take our spatial map and we'll turn it over towards the north, and we'll go march over into the landscape that is Ubud. Ubud has 3 distinct regions, as you can see. There's the bit of the south, and there's this high density, this super high density in the center, and then there's also a tail that's beginning to grow towards the north. Ubud's expansion is unlike in Canggu, where the expansion could only really go further inland up to a certain point before it hits the city of Denpasar. And it can go no more further out west because there's ocean there, and it can't really go south anymore because it's already built up. So Canggu is forced as a region to only go northwest. This area is the only direction it can grow, and it's impeded by growth because as developments go further and further west, you can imagine the congestion that everybody has been building up any point to the south. This exacerbates any developer coming out here is looking at getting further risk. So we think that this area is probably not going to continue growing in terms of its access to growth opportunities. What about Ubud? Ubud is quite a different beast, but let's go back down into looking at the properties in Ubud again. So if we take a look at Ubud properties, what do we see? We see, interestingly enough, a lot more solo accommodations. This one has 508 reviews, and it can only accommodate 1 person. It looks like it's part of a guest house, in fact. It's an upstairs room. So a different type of traveler, a different type of size of accommodation, and that was our first random sample from Ubud. But what else do we find as we look through Ubud? Let's go and pick another random point over towards the north. Here's a 2-bedroom villa. Astonishing, 357 reviews at 4.91. That's incredible. It is extremely difficult to maintain that level of hospitality across that many reviews. You're basically getting almost pure 5-star reviews from everybody who is going through your property, and Punyai over here is deservedly a super host. As we can see, one of the typical images that we see of Ubud is this infinity edge pool overlooking the jungle. You can see that this host has captured this moment, but also you see that for the most part, we're looking at smaller capacity properties and getting these really high rankings as well. Let's continue more. Let's go and find one more sample before we leave Ubud. And this one's, I think, a larger property. This one has up to 8 guests, 3 bedrooms. Astonishing again. 597 reviews at 4.9. That's even harder than the previous listing. It's essentially perfect reviews each and every single time across a global swath of guests coming from every country. Once again, you see that really typical and really eye-catching design where there's an infinity edge pool overlooking a rice paddy, and not too big too as well. You can see the capacity of this property seems to be fairly small. There's a small deck area overlooking the pool. It has not a huge pool, not like these Olympic-sized pools that we used to see in Nusa Dua, but the condition and the natural setting does make up, I think, for the size. That's an incredible thing to look at. Oh, it's got this cool swinging chair feature as well. All right. Oh, and also a video projector. That's always a crowd pleaser when, oh, outdoor movies over the pool. Okay, so you can see that the distinguishing characteristics of strong rentals always offer a unique selling point. They give the guest something that they weren't expecting, and adding to the delight and the uniqueness and the ability for this listing to command a unique price as well. Okay, so after exploring Ubud and Canggu, we see potentially Ubud just has so much more space to expand into. Ubud can expand over to the west, can expand over to the east, north, and south. There's just so much space around looking at this, and we can also see that the diversity of properties that are showing up in Ubud are also a little bit more diverse. There's a little bit more variance too. Okay, so looking across and comparing to Ubud and Canggu, that based on the spatial map analysis, it does look like Ubud is significantly stronger in terms of its ability to capture market expansion than Canggu is at the moment. But that's not going to be the only metric that we're going to take a look at today. We're also going to do a bit more of a deep dive into the social media, the social media cues that are being left behind on the internet. So for this, we're going to go over and we're going to look at TikTok. In a previous episode, I already mentioned that the power of TikTok is that it is one of the largest and most abundant social media platforms used in Bali to record the visual experiences that people undergo when they're there. TikTok is really, really large. Instagram's even larger than TikTok. However, watch my previous video and you'll see that the two trend lines on TikTok and Instagram follow each other for most of the critical hashtags for regions in Bali, which means that if you see rise in TikTok, you also see rise in Instagram and vice versa. So when we put the TikTok analytics here, what are we seeing? We're looking at how popular or how many pieces of content are tagged on, oh wait, let's get this adjusted a little bit better. We're looking at how much content is actually being tagged with the hashtag Ubud and how much content is being tagged with the hashtag Canggu on TikTok. So this gives us a relative bearing in terms of what the overall abundance and the impact of each area in terms of how many times it's being captured and placed online. So clearly on a side-by-side comparison, you can see that Canggu is at 98,000 posts in the past 12 months and 209,000 overall. Ubud is 134,000 posts in the past 12 months and 312,000 overall. Overall meaning that from the first time the platform like TikTok was able to capture these hashtags, that's the overall. So all in all, almost a little bit more than 50% more traffic in terms of the amount of content being generated in Ubud than in Canggu, which is very, very indicative of where visitors are actually leaving their mark. Each tag of Ubud, each tag of Canggu, of course, goes and seeds the next trip to discover these regions. And so when you see more tags, that area also lends itself to more growth. All right, let's look at the final. Well, actually not final yet. There's a few more. Let's then look at the Google Maps. So we'll go side by side on two Google Maps and we'll see what each region looks like in terms of its geography. So I've picked a few proxy locations in Ubud, including the Ubud Palace, the Arjuna statue, and also that's not the Arjuna statue, that's the Ubud Palace, and the monkey forest to represent 3 corners of Ubud. So we'll go on the right side of the screen and we'll fly into this area so that you can see it up close. So here we go. There we zoom in. All right, so the 3 little points that you see on the green side of the screen, including the Arjuna statue, the Ubud Palace, and the monkey forest, represent a tight perimeter around Ubud. Now on the other side of the screen, we'll go into Canggu. And Canggu, what I've actually set is I've set the Echo Beach and Deus Ex Machina as our primary areas where we're going to take a look. Deus Ex Machina and Canggu Echo Beach are two of the oldest landmarks in the region too as well. And we're going to zoom in and take a look at those. So we're going to fly in to these two regions, and now we can see, boom. Okay, now we're seeing Canggu on the left side of the screen, and we're seeing Ubud on the right side of the screen. Okay, hopefully that is fairly clear. Now, what we really want to do is we want to take a look and go back in time. We want to see, what did these areas actually look like before they became really, really popular. So we'll go, just for the sake of argument, down to the oldest time period here in 1985 on Ubud. And you can see in the 1985 chart, there was not high resolution satellite photography, so we'll have to step up to 2002 and then 2005. And 2005, we can see the extent of the growth in Ubud. So at that point, you can see that there's still a lot of empty regions over here on the west side of Ubud, and a lot of empty space over on the east side. But there was already a very established town in the center. You see this entire kingdom of Ubud has already a lot of residential areas as well. And zooming out further, we have some context of the area too as well. Now let's go over to Canggu. Canggu, if we go back to that same time period, about in 2005, 2006, this was what Canggu looked like. Canggu was almost entirely barren. You see that all the buildings have vanished, all the development has gone away. It's back to rice paddies again. But if you go further now, let's say, I want to show you the most amount of contrast, okay? So take a look at Canggu as it evolved in the 2020s, okay? So bam, so much more development came in 20 years later. And then this development has essentially been building up year after year to where you see Canggu in the form in which it is today. All that rice paddy land, all that area has been spoken for, and you don't see it around anymore. Similarly, let's go over to Ubud and see what happened around the 2020s as well. If we trace this over to the period of time in 2020, you can see Ubud, for the most part, has kind of kept its major city and also the major green areas around it. A lot of this land has not been built on. And let's keep on going. So we see as it evolved from 2020 up to 2023, slightly bit more in this area that used to be the backyard, but not a lot of development over here on the east side. So that's what the geographical survey looks like. Okay, so Canggu, quite a lot of expansion, a lot of growth in the past 20 years. Ubud has remained relatively stable in terms of its overall development, but once again, a lot of the space that is now called Ubud goes further to the north, further to the east, further to the west than where the traditional center of the city is. Now, let's sum up everything and take a look at the grand finale. The biggest stat that we can take a look at, of course, is this. This is Google Trends. And this shows the impact of relative search volume for these two keywords, Canggu versus Ubud. We're taking a look at the trend line from 2004 across the entire world until now. So you can see Canggu was always behind Ubud. Ubud was already fairly popular in 2004 with a relative impact score of 14 versus Canggu of 1. And then it just really took off. It took off huge around 2000. It reached a peak around 2019 before crashing during COVID, and then it picked up again after the 2020s to 2024. But even to this day, Ubud has a huge amount of interest, almost double the interest, a little bit more than double the interest than Canggu has, with the relative impact score of 75 versus Canggu 32. So what does this tell us? What does all this data and all these spatial maps and all these statistics and looking at all these graphs tell us? It tells us a few really interesting facts. It tells us that, number one, Canggu has seen explosive amounts of transformational growth since the 20 years that when I first got to Bali. Ubud has seen growth, but it's seen much more popularity too as well. Despite all that growth that's been happening in Canggu and far less growth, let's say, around the immediate region of Ubud's heart and center, Ubud still remains a much more popular area for traveler interest. So why is that? Why are more people choosing to think and go to Ubud than Canggu? I don't really have the pure answer for that. If you were to ask me as an opinion, that I think it had something to do with maybe eat, pray, love. The image that many travelers come when they decide to come to Bali is that they have this image of a tropical lost paradise, sort of a Mayan civilization in the rainforest clouds where Master Yoda sits there and dispenses true introspection wisdom to those who are looking for a solution to a midlife crisis. Well, that has begun a narrative that has driven this interest for those to seek opportunities to travel and to, let's say, transform themselves in Bali. So I don't have the full answer for that, and perhaps the answer is a bit hand-wavy, but just looking at the stats alone, you can see that Ubud is by far the most powerful and the most heavy region in Bali in terms of its ability to attract investors and also tourists to Bali. All right, hopefully that's an insight. Hopefully you didn't know exactly that was the case, or you didn't actually see it this way, but now that we can visualize these facts, we hope that it becomes more clear. All right, this is it for this episode of Market Insights with Jing here. I look forward to seeing you on the next Bali Business Review, where we'll go into more comparisons of different regions across Bali and perhaps across the Southeast Asia region too. Stay tuned.